Okay, so I titled the message today, Wise Counsel from Mom, because it is Mother's Day. So, Wise Counsel from Mom. Now, there's a couple things I've noticed. One thing that I've noticed is that generally it is consistent with mothers is the willingness to invest whatever time, energy, and means it is necessary to make sure that the needs of her children are met. She will make considerable sacrifices for her kids, regardless of the love that she receives in return from them. Doesn't really matter. She always is looking to watch over them and provide for them. And what I've noticed is regardless of the age of the child, it doesn't really matter. Mom's always still looking out for you, okay? So you can be 50 years old or approaching 50 or however you go. As long as mom is still alive, she's going to be looking to provide for you. One of the things that I think is always funny is, when you're in, you don't have to go here, but in Matthew chapter 20, 20, and 21, there's an address by the sons of Thunder's mommy, right? That she comes to Jesus asking that he might do something for her, and that is that my sons might sit on your left hand and your right hand. Now, as a guy, we would make fun of the disciples pretty hard on that, especially adult men and your mom stepping in for you. But nonetheless, we're missing the point. Mom is trying to ensure a future good for her sons, right? She's trying to make provisions for that. You think of Ruth and Naomi. Naomi was pretty clear about making provisions for Ruth, giving her instructions on what she ought to do in this, blossoming relationship that she's developing with Boaz. Or you could think of Exodus chapter 2. You don't have to go there. The first couple verses, we find that all the Hebrew male babies are supposed to be what? Killed, right? And so Jacobed, I believe is her name, correct me if I'm wrong later after service, but she makes provisions not only to provide for the safety of her son, but she hatches a pretty good plan so that she might actually be able to raise the child later on, utilizing the daughter as well. I'm just saying, I think it's interesting how moms do provide for their kids in one shape or another. Sometimes moms can provide for their children in ways that probably aren't the best ways Scripture gives to us. Remember Jacob and Esau? There was a lot of deception going on the part of Jacob, and that was at the behest of mom. Once again, she knew the promises that God had made in regards to her child and who was going to serve who, and she took it upon herself to make sure that was going to come to fruition. One of the other things that we don't talk a lot about her is Hagar. There's kind of a tender exchange between Hagar and God and her little boy in Genesis chapter 21. Now, generally, we would associate Hagar and her child with modern-day Islam, is how we would generally interpret most of that. So when we think about Hagar, we don't think much about her. But what's interesting about that text is she's trying to make provisions for her son. They're basically out in a desert wasteland. They've been kicked out, and they're running out of water. And so she sets her little boy in the shade instead of in the open sun. And then she prays that God, I don't want to see the death of my son. But God miraculously provides some water, and then she gives her son some water. I'm just saying, I'm taken in when I read through the pages of Scripture of how it is that a mother is always seeking to provide for her children. Other things I've noticed is that mothers will still take you to task, regardless of how big your britches may be. So it really doesn't matter if you've grown up to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or if you have become someone in the eyes of your society that you live that's very well respected. Mom doesn't really care. All mom cares is if she hears something or sees something in regards to how you're conducting yourself. You can be assured you're going to get a visit, probably, or at least a phone call, to let you know that what you've said or what you've done isn't right. I don't care if you're Elon Musk. Maybe Elon Musk from time to time gets a call from his mom saying, "What are you doing? And what are you saying?" But that's a good thing. Why? Because the mothers are concerned about the actions of their children, because regardless of how old you still are reflective of your mom and your dad, right? You represent me to some extent. I can remember my dad telling me that. It's not Father's Day. But he said you have to remember that you represent us as a family. And mothers understand that. And in all seriousness, a mother's instruction is vital in a child's upbringing. Mothers have always played a crucial role in molding and shaping the children, their ethical standards, their moral standards, the manner in which they'll act in society, the way that they conduct their life. When we think about Jesus' upbringing, for whatever reason, our theology seems to be that Jesus basically just raised himself. Because he's perfect, right? And his mom and dad's not perfect. Please understand something. Jesus in his full humanity was raised by a mom and a dad. That means Jesus was taught by his mother. Okay? Don't think that Jesus was just born and they just set him in the living room and said, "Man, this kid's amazing." And then he just raised himself. It doesn't work that way. If you and I believe in the full humanity of Jesus Christ, then his mom taught him the truths of Scripture and planted that seed within him so that he would learn and grow in wisdom, right? And in favor with God. She did that. Somebody had to do that. And when you think about it from a Jewish perspective, once again, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but primarily, the children stayed with the mother for the first 5 or 6 years, if I recall, largely until they were kind of cut loose to spend more time with dad. So the formative years of the children was largely determined by the nature of the mother in Jewish families. And so you can be assured that she taught him the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, right? These are things that are critical for him. Matter of fact, the book of Proverbs clearly reveals and indicates to us that in ancient times, as well as it should be today, mothers shared with the fathers the responsibility of teaching and instructing their children. It's one of the things that I find in Proverbs chapter 1, 8 and 9. He says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." Right? So mom and dad are both included on this list. And then you might ask yourselves, well, why? Why do I need to hear the instruction of dad? Why not forsake the law of my mom? Because they will be graceful ornaments about your head and chains on your neck. A means of preservation and protection, right? A means of counsel and comfort. Also in Proverbs chapter 6, 20 and 22, "My son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother." Once again, bind them continually upon your heart, tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you're awake, they will speak with you. A lot of activity going on by the instruction that was given into the heart of the child, right? Don't forsake that stuff. Don't toss that stuff aside. Now, there's really 3 things that stand out in our text in Proverbs chapter 31. 3 things that she kind of targets. And I've come to the conclusion that the reason mom deals with these 3 specific things is because she knows her son, right? As moms raising children, whether they be boys or girls, you know the tendencies and the weaknesses and the strengths of your children, don't you? Those are the areas that you are going to address largely, so as to help them understand how it is they should live, the things that they should stay away from, the individuals that they should stay away from, right? And this is no different, because if he's a king, right, it says King Lemuel, that means at some point he was probably a prince. At some point he was a young guy, while dad was sitting on the throne. So she's noticed certain tendencies with her son as he's grown up. And these are things that then she now addresses, and she taught him. That's why he says this is an utterance, right? That his mom taught me. Something that I have to keep in the forefront of my mind. The first thing is this. It's not for kings. Oh, don't give away, your strength to women. nor your ways to that which destroys king. So the first thing is here is that as a king, there will be a ton of pressure asserted to you or on you by the ladies, okay, that you might come alongside of them and make them one of your tribe, in essence, because a lot of the kings at that time were polygamous kings. And we're in the book of Proverbs, and we know who wrote Proverbs, which was Solomon. And Solomon had a whole lot of wives, right? So she knows the tendency of her son, and she wants to make sure her son is well aware of the admonition that if you give your strength, or your wealth, or your virtue, or your valor, or your vigor, if you give that to women, then what happens? Nothing good comes in giving your strength to the woman. Now, when he's talking about the woman, she's not talking about the wife, okay? When he says, when it says give your strength to women, it's talking about loose women, immoral women, adulterous women. That's what we're talking about here. If you give your strength to that type of woman, there's great ramifications to pay for you. And Proverbs is loaded with this. And just let me read a few verses to you. Proverbs chapter 5, 9 through 11. Proverbs chapter 5, 9 through 11. So the admonition is here, verse 9, chapter 5. Well, actually, let's just start in verse 7. Remove your way from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor, or if you will, your vigor to others, and your years to the cruel one, lest aliens be filled with your wealth, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner, and you mourn at last when your flesh and your body are consumed. Now ask any man, if they're open to being asked, if they've had an adulterous affair, the effects on their life. Most of them will tell you, well, I'm living in a little apartment. Well, that kind of goes with aliens being filled with your wealth, right? In other words, somebody else is enjoying all the things that you work for because of one moment in time where you decided it was okay to fill your bed with another woman. Proverbs chapter 6, 25. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids, for by means of a harlot a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. You ask the question, can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? What's the implied answer? Obviously not. Obviously not. Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? The implied answer, no. So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife and who touches her shall not be innocent. There's great repercussions to be had for that. And Proverbs 7:21. Here we see with enticing speech, the adulteress caused him to yield with flattering lips. She seduced him, and he went after her as an ox goes to the slaughter, as a fool to the correction of the stocks. Verse 24, now therefore listen to me, my children, pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths, for she's cast down the wounded. All who were slain by her were strong men. Her house is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. There's nothing good to be said, right? About messing around with the immoral woman, the adulterous woman, and having the affair. She understands this. Now, there's a lot of speculation on this, and this is all it is speculation. The word Lemuel means devoted to God. And there's a lot of speculation that Lemuel is just a pet name for Solomon. And that the one who's the mom given the instruction to Solomon is actually Bathsheba. Interesting conjecture. I don't know if any of that's true. But I don't know. You think of current day, I think I've lost track of the number of politicians over the past few years who have gave their strength to a woman and had an adulterous affair, and all that they worked on was torn down. All their wealth, their public image, their marriages, their occupation, and so on. I actually Googled this, just out of curiosity. The number of politicians and the downfall in regards to an adulterous affair. It was absolutely populated with so many people. The gentleman named Edwards who was running for office, Democrat, I can't remember his name. Gary Hart, all the religious figures through the ages. Hosea says, whoredom takes away the heart. It takes away the understanding. One of the clearest examples of this is in the life of Solomon himself, right? Solomon is a guy who really started out well. You remember the dedication of the temple? Remember him getting on his knees on an elevated platform before the whole congregation of Israel, seeking God's favor and his mercy on Israel, on him, on his kingdom to come, right? And God responds in kind. He started out really, really well. But it doesn't seem like he ended very well. Because when you get to 1 Kings chapter 11 and you read the first couple verses, you learn that all the women that he had brought in and made his wives, and all the concubines that he had, and you guys know the number, I don't need to throw the number out. There's a problem with all that. 1 Kings chapter 11:1, King Solomon loved many foreign women as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord said to the children of Israel, don't intermarry with any of them, because they will turn your heart away. And then it says Solomon clung to these in love. And one wonders what kind of love is actually identified here. It's probably most like in the Greek term, the eros, a lustful love, right? Verse 4, so it was when Solomon was old that his wives turned his heart after other gods. And his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as the heart of his father David was. Here's the problem, though. It wasn't only to the ruin of Solomon. What else was it to lead? What else did it lead to? It led to idolatrous worship. Because while it is that he loved all these foreign women, he started making all these poles and images that these women worshipped. And he started dragging those into Israel. And then the Israelites were becoming idolatrous. Not that it was a far-fetch for them anyhow. It was always easy for them to become idolatrous. He didn't help the matter. And what happened? After his reign, we have a big split in Israel, don't we? So what I'm saying is the impact is not only you, the impact is all those folks around you. Because we give our strength to the woman. Second admonishment of this is the abuse of alcohol. She wants her son to understand something, that if you're swimming in alcohol, you're not going to make good decisions, right? And seeing as you're a king, it's important that you make good decisions. She says in verse 4, it's not for kings, O Lemuel, it's not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Now, to drink here in the Hebrew means to be intensely alcoholic. In essence, it means to be the drunkard. It's further developed in the remaining, in the following verse where it says intoxicating, okay? What is she telling her son? Here, okay, it's interesting, I just had this discussion. Here, she indicates a total, if you will, she's not indicating a total abstinence from alcohol, but she is saying, you know what? Don't drink too much. Because if you're drinking too much, what happens? You know what happens when you drink too much. I think most of us were young at one point, right? Yeah. And we can remember probably a time Or we had something we shouldn't have had, or too much of it. Proverbs chapter 23:29 says, who has woe, who has sorrow, who has contentions, who has complaints, who has wounds without cause. You don't even know you're getting hurt, right? Why? Because you're kind of out of it. Who has redness of eyes, those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of a mixed wine. Don't look at the wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup and swirls smoothly around. Because it bites like a serpent, stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things. You'll see the mythical snipe, of which there is none. Your heart will utter perverse things. You will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, they've struck me, but I wasn't hurt. They've beaten me. I don't feel it. When I awake, when shall I seek another drink? Look, you all, some of us have had family members that are absolutely consumed with the alcohol, right? And you know how it was when you were around them. You know how distorted their understanding was. Their logic, their thinking. Everything's messed up. You can't make good decisions when you're intoxicated. And she knows this. And maybe it's, once again, maybe she understands the nature of her son. Maybe he's given a little bit to this, right? Maybe she's seen a little bit this in the past in his youthfulness. You can't be that way now that you're a king. Now, some people could object and say, well, the style of government that you have will absolutely eliminate all that. If you're just autocratic and you got one man sitting on the throne like Putin over there, he can do anything he wants and be in a drunken stupor and make dumb laws that affect everybody, right? True enough. Well, in the United States, that would never happen. We have a Supreme Court, right? We do have a Supreme Court. And guess how many is in that? 7. That means 4 and 3. That means one Supreme Court justice can go off on a binger the night before and have to make a decision on the next day that affects the whole United States of America. I'm not saying that's happened, okay? I'm just saying. Doesn't matter what style of government you win. Drinking to the point of intoxication is going to mess stuff up for you and the people that you oversee. Can be a local mayor for all that matter, right? Mom says, just stay away from it. Stay away from it. It's no good for you. Because the drunk man not only makes bad decisions, the drunk man can be easily manipulated, can't he? Oh yeah, you know. I remember as a young boy, there was one of the fellows in the neighborhood who had a taste for the drink. Kids all thought it was a big joke. Go ask for about anything you wanted in that state, because he wasn't thinking clearly. You remember what happened to John the Baptist? What happened to John the Baptist? You guys all know this. Got his head beheaded, right? What were they doing prior to all that activity? They're having a big party and they were drinking. And while it is, they're boozing it up. The daughter comes in and she does her dance. And by the way, it's not one of those, oh, that's a pretty little dance. No, it was a seductive dance by a young woman. And a man in a drunken stupor is so inflamed with his lust, what does he say? Up to half my kingdom I'll give you. What do you want? And she comes back with, why don't you just give me the head of John the Baptist on a platter? Is that a good decision made by a guy in charge? Yeah, go chop his head off because, well, I guess I'm kind of constrained. I'll lose face if I don't do it now. Mom understands this. Any mom worth her salt will tell her son or her daughter, stay away from the booze. Stay away from the alcohol. Because there's lasting ramifications. And that's something that we don't think about. That one moment may follow you the rest of your life. I mean, I'm reading about examples now that were thousands of years ago, right? I'm just saying, it has long-lasting effects. King Lemuel's mother knew then it would distort his judgment and potentially bring judgment on himself before God. So just stay away from it. She says in the preceding verses after that, there are, if you want to give drink, then give drink to these people, right? But you stay away from it because you're in charge. And when you're in charge and you're overseeing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, you have to make good decisions, son. The third admonishment is found in verse 8 and verse 9. Now, I kind of like the NIV, the way that it reads. The NIV reads like this. It says, "Speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly and defend the rights of the poor and needy." This is one of the things that they were supposed to do. In Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 19, "You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality. You shall not take a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the word of the righteous." Our judicial system that we have largely is corrupted by all sorts of abuses. Willfully neglecting, taking bribes, promises made, backdoor deals that are given, and the people that actually need justice to be executed aren't getting justice that it might be executed. King Lemuel's mother says we're to stand up, speak for those who are not heard. To stand up and speak for those who are not heard. We always talk a lot about the destitute and the poor and the needy. And they're everywhere. I was reminded that yesterday when I went down to the hospital. And I'm downtown and there's 9 o'clock in the morning and there's people, and it's not just people walking around, okay? It's people that are living on the streets. Destitute, the afflicted, the poor, the needy. We don't think much about it. Mom says, "Son, you got people like that in your kingdom. You can't just leave them out to dry. You got to make some sort of provisions. You got to reach out. You got to do something for them. Just don't let them continue on in that course." I mean, when Jesus Christ came, who did he come for largely? It wasn't the righteous. It wasn't the affluent. It was the outcasts, the poor, the afflicted, the destitute, the needy, right? And Mom says in the same thing, man, you got to step up and you got to speak for these folks. You got to make sure they get justice. You got to make sure their needs are met in some way. And you know what? Not only that, meeting their needs, you got to speak to them in some manner where they might not continue in the same mode. Right? So, we're all about helping people that are needy and the afflicted. But how have we given them a new directive? Helping people is great. But if all we do is give them money, then it sends them right back in the same boat. You know what I'm saying? This is why the gospel of Jesus Christ has such strength and power and hope for change, right? And I'm not saying that everybody that you evangelize and share the gospel of Jesus Christ with in the snap of a finger suddenly is going from this manner of thinking and living to this manner of thinking. It doesn't help that way. Sometimes we got to get our elbows dirty and get in, but that goes along with helping the poor and the needy, right? And I like the fact that, and I've kind of reversed the text a little bit, but I like the fact that how she started all this out. Because there may be the tendency of a king, right? Even in light of the mother's pleading, a king to say, well, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm the king. Right? I'm the guy. Thanks for the call, Mom. Appreciate you stopping by. But I'm the king. But you know what? You can't really... Mom won't let that pass, will she? No, because what's it say? Verse 2, what, my son? What, son of my womb? Yeah, okay. What, son of my vows? So in other words, if the instruction and the pleadings of mother don't hit home, mom's got a couple other tools in the bag she's going to use to make sure you do what you're supposed to do. Don't get too heady about things, son, because you are my son. You might be a king, but you're my son, mine. I gave you birth, right? I'm the one for 9 months that had you in my belly while you were being fearfully and wonderfully made, son. And what does moms like to say? I've heard it a time or two. I brought you into this world, I can take you out, right? But the reality is a man, especially a man just doesn't have a trump card to negate when mom says, you are the son of my womb. You just don't have authority over mom. She's always got that. And it always makes a man go, all right, mother, I get it. All right? And to make matters worse, she says, you know what, you're the son of my vows. Oh, now this is the guilt trip. You're the son of my vows. Before you were born, I made a vow to God that I would raise you in a way that honored God. And the manner in which you're acting, it's hard for me to maintain that vow that I made to God. It was a vow, it's freely entered into, but it's compulsory now that you made the vow, right? Son, I made that vow on your behalf. Is this the way you're going to live? Now that's the guilt trip, right? There's nobody better at guilting men into doing things than mothers. Nobody. Mothers are better than even wives at guilting men into doing things. And don't tell me you mothers haven't guilted your children into doing things. I know you have. So if the pleadings don't work, remember who you are, who brought you into the world, and remember, I took a vow before God. So I said, moms got their ways, right? But the instruction is sound, isn't it? You're going to sit on the throne, there's things you got to avoid and things you got to do. And you can't be successful in doing them if you're giving your strength to women, if you're drinking intoxicating drink all the time and neglecting the people that need you the most. I think it's interesting because it's an utterance that she taught him, and I don't know how old he was when she taught him. But here it is, right? And he's a king at this point. He's remembered it. This is the thing about a mom with your children. Instill in them because it will serve them well as they get older. So even if they're an adult and they happen to be a king in this instance, they'll remember the words of mother and the love that she showed for them. Let's pray.